All right. Welcome, Dave Nisbet. I'm excited for this one. You've got stone lifting is your thing. You've mastered it in a way that no one else has on my Instagram. So I'm excited to learn as
Great.
much as I can. I've dabbled a little bit with it. So I found a big stone I liked in the woods. I was building a concept, um, a saw stone I liked, and I brought it home. And some of my friends who saw me playing with the stone, they sent me your
Right on.
page. So I've been following you a
That's
fair
cool.
while. But yeah, thanks for doing what
Oh
you're
yeah.
doing. I love it. It's a lot of fun to
Thanks, man.
see.
Appreciate that.
So I'm curious, just from a programming perspective. Like I'm a trainer. What is your routine like? How structured is it? How creative is it? And then what is the volume like? Do you still do other weightlifting? Do you still get under a barbell, dumbbell, stuff like that, or do you focus mainly on the stones? What's your routine like with
Yeah.
stone
So I
training?
mean, it's going to vary depending on what my particular goals are at a particular time. I definitely encourage the use of barbells and dumbbells and regular gym equipment. I've done times where I focus solely on stone lifting for all my strength, and I found that I had weaknesses. There was gap showing, let's put it that way, in my performance. And I actually, when I removed a lot of the standard barbell work off the floor, I found my picks for stones actually diminishing. Right. So I'm a big fan personally of having a well rounded routine. I find that stones are amazing. They're absolutely my focus, they're my goal. But I also see a ton of value in ensuring you work on all of the weaknesses that you have outside of that, keeping a well rounded body, a healthy body. My goal, my career, not my goal, pardon me, my career, my job is a firefighter. And so I do not want to leave any gaps in my fitness or my strength for my job application as well. So I'm coming at it from a couple angles. One is a strength athlete, but also as somebody that needs to be able to perform when shit hits the fan, right? So part of that is my responsibility to make sure that I am in good shape all around. I mean, there's certainly things like if I wasn't a firefighter, I wouldn't do a lot of the things that I do, I suppose, like trying to keep up certain levels of fitness that don't maybe directly impact my goals of stone lifting. But to answer your it's quite a broad question as to how I train. It is very dependent on the particular goals. But yes, it is well rounded with stone, with gym implements. Um, what I like to do a lot of the times is I will find a program that I really enjoy. Like, so, say, like the stuff that Josh Bryant puts out with Jailhouse Strong, I find is a very well rounded program. And I will use some of his stuff as a fundamental, and then I will tweak it by exchanging exercise, exchanging volume, or a variety of things to fit my needs. Now, the only reason that I do that is I also program for people. I think I have a really quality understanding of how to make people stronger. I've seen that in the results of people that I've coached, but I just have a hard time sticking to my own program because I can build a wicked program and go, yeah, right on, this is cool. And then the day of, it's almost like I don't give myself the enough of the respect to actually stick to my own program. So I've come to learn that that's just about for me, right? And so I like to have some of the freedom to play with things and to adapt it as well. So I'm not sure if that quite answers your question or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a picture for how to fit something like this
Sure.
into a routine. So you mentioned the being the well-rounded strength and applying that to functional abilities in your field, which is firefighting. I'm curious. You said there's some gaps when you focus more on stone training, and then other gaps when you focus more on
Sure.
barbell training. So I'm curious, when it comes to the stone training, what are kind of the strengths and weaknesses as it pertains to firefighting? And what are the focuses that you're going for specifically in firefighting?
Well, I actually wouldn't say that stones expose weaknesses to firefighting. I think that stones actually add a lot to firefighting. Um, Stones, how do I put this? The world isn't shaped like barbells, right? Dumbbells and barbells are ergonomically made to be as efficient as possible to be lifted, which is why you can see some of the lifts people do in them unbelievable. The world isn't made like that. The world is made with heavy, odd objects. And so being able to do that is fantastic. The anaerobic capacity that can come from some of that is also great. So that is a really good fundamental that I find stone lifting contributes to firefighting, right? Like we will have just a loose idea, like we have these huge industrial fans that we use for blowing smoke out of the building or whatever it is, right? Being able to pick that up by myself, not needing somebody else, be able to carry it up sets of stairs, set it, leaving somebody else to be able to do another task is super helpful on the fire ground. So those kind of things I find are fantastic. Having that well-rounded odd object, odd object strength is great, but you can't just rely on stones to be well-rounded. Stones do not help you necessarily with a lot of mobility. They do not help with a lot of things. Your anaerobic or your aerobic capacity will not really come from stones, because yes, you can do high rep sets, and that's going to be fantastic for anaerobic and maybe it's your lactate threshold, but still you need to be able to work for 10, 15, 30, 45 minutes hard, right? When it comes to firefighting. And so there are, I like the assault bike for that kind of thing, where you'll do a little bit longer duration, where you'll do heavy sprints for 15, 20, 30 seconds and then backing off and then just keeping hard work. Because in my experience with firefighting, I've been doing it 14 years now. You need to be able to keep your heart rate and your breath under control. And so when you get that heart rate elevated, you need to be able to bring it back down, or you're not going to be able to do the tasks, right? So if you burn all of your energy dragging hose onto the door, kicking a door in, and then you get into the house to fight the fire, or whatever building is to fight the fire, and you can't breathe, well, you're going to be useless, right? So you need to have the capacity to bring that back down. And so, as much as stone lifting is one of my favorite things I've ever come across, I don't think that it necessarily fills that niche for making sure that I have the aerobic capacity that I need for my job.
Oh, interesting. When it comes to training your aerobic capacity and some of that stuff, I recently started training jiu-jitsu over the last few years, and it's similar to some of your applications in that it's functional. It's awkward. There's a lot of, it's different. It's not organized and repeatable like barbell training is. And I found that my rib cage, I feel like, has gotten a little thicker, and that the little muscles have, and it used to be like when I'd roll, I'd get taken down or something like that. My whole back would crack, and now it's all a little firmer. I'm curious, do you notice a lot of that with the stone training? Some of these things that aren't necessarily the target of these exercises, but some of those boosts. And then does that help you in realistic scenarios where there's not a lot of oxygen or it's a high stress environment? Do you feel like you've got a more robust foundation in some of these broader senses?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I grew up wrestling, so I know exactly what you're talking about with that. The scrambling that can be there, and the odd strengths that you build through grappling. Grappling is amazing. I honestly think, like, whenever wrestling comes up, I always say to people, wrestling is the hardest sport on the planet. And if you don't believe me, it's because you haven't done it, right? You're never going to find a wrestler who's dabbled in other sports and said, nah, wrestling isn't the hardest, right? So obviously there's so many parallels to wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So, I mean, I highly respect grappling of any variety. With respect to stone lifting, yes, of course, there's going to be things that carry over in ways you didn't expect. Like my core has become very, very strong from it. Like not just my core, let me just rephrase that, my whole trunk, right? So your trunk basically from your hips to your collarbone, less your arms, right? So that entire area has become very robust. And what's interesting about that is I've seen this specifically with myself. So this past summer, pardon me, I spent a lot of time working on carrying and not necessarily a lot of shouldering of stones. I focus so much on carrying because this summer coming up, I'm going to Iceland to carry the Husbel stone, which is a huge task. And I didn't do much shouldering, but then when I finished the summer, because I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, we have snow on the ground for 5 months out of the year. Like it snows usually end of October, and here we are at the beginning of April, and we just had a snowstorm a few days ago where we got a foot of snow, right? So our season, if you want to call it, is limited. And so once I wasn't able to carry outside, I started doing more shouldering again, and my shouldering went through the roof. I hit a huge PR after not doing a ton of shouldering because of the trunk stability I got from carrying, right? So that there's a lot of carryover, and power lifters will get a similar effect with squats and deadlifts. A lot of times, if they focus on their deadlifts, they will see elements of their squat getting better. You can't usually raise them both up at the exact same time, but you will see some carryover from those different lifts. So yeah, the answer is yes. I definitely have seen some carryover, and interesting results.
Yeah. I think of this idea of transference, where like some exercises, the benefits transfer to a lot of movements, whereas other exercises are more specified. The benefits from training that don't necessarily transfer. So it seems like stone lifting would have a high transference value relative to a lot
I
of other
think
workouts.
stones,
And I like the trunk. The concept of the trunk
yeah,
is.
I
I like how you
really
brought that up.
like I believe in, and so when I talk about stone lifting for the actual application and development of strength, sandbags will follow directly beside it as well. A lot of people don't have access to a ton of stones, and sandbags are going to be, you're going to get a lot, not all, but a lot of the exact same results out of a sandbag as you will a stone. So for people listening that go like, where the heck do I find a bunch of stones? You can do most of this and get most of these results with sandbags. And as far as for what you're training for grappling, like man, like my brother who I do stone lifting with he was a better wrestler than me, and we both talk about like how much wrestling would have actually benefited, or stone lifting would have benefited our wrestling. And actually, I was reached out by we have the University of Alberta, and we have some really good wrestling out of there. That's where I used to wrestle growing up, and one of their athletes reached out to me to ask if I would help with like a little seminar down at our stone site with some of the wrestlers there because this individual sees the direct carryover. And so I truly believe in these as a great training mechanism for other sports application as well, if done properly, of course, like any training though.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think the unique ability of it is that transference. It transfers over to pretty broadly. Um, uh, Out of curiosity, what is the difference between sandbag and stone training? What are the benefits of the stone? Since I'm a bit of both, more sandbag, but the stone is a little different. But yeah, so what's that extra, the hard shell? What does that extra
Well,
component add to it?
so with stone lifting, there's a lot of layers, right? So sandbags, the history of stone lifting is something I'm sure we can get into later on this podcast, and I think it's fascinating. But when we're talking about the actual specifics of stones versus sandbag, is every single stone is different. Every stone requires the ability to read the stone is one of the greatest skills that any stone lifter can develop because I can go anywhere in the world and find a stone. And because I've lifted hundreds of different stones hundreds of times, I'm going to be able to read that stone very quickly. I'm going to know which handles are going to work best for my strength. I'm going to know that when I get that stone into my lap, I might have to turn it 90 degrees in order to get better handles to hike that up to my chest. You have to be able to read it. The grips on stone can be very challenging. Sometimes a sandbag has better grips than a stone, sometimes it's worse. But generally speaking, if you have a 250-pound sandbag and I have a 250-pound sandbag, we're going to know if we're generally on par with each other, right? Like, let's say we're having a sandbag off or whatever it is. Now, when it comes to stones, there isn't that option. And that's one of the things I think is really cool about it is it's not fair to compare yourself to somebody else because the stones are all different that we're lifting on, unless you go to a historical stone that's all uniform. And when you remove that competitive aspect of it, you get to focus on the fundamental beauty of what it is you're actually doing. So it's not kind of like you're not measuring dicks with guys as much as some other people like to, right? Like I see, and I was this way too when I first started it, but you want to be able to measure yourself against other people. That's a basic instinct for competitive people, right? But the more I've gotten into it, the more I've stepped back and I just don't care about that. I just do what I like and what helps build up for me because you recognize the fact that, my 300-pound stone could be twice as hard as your 300-pound one, or it could be half as difficult. And so just leave your ego and just focus on what works best for you and just enjoy the practice of
I love that. It cracks me up that your baseline sandbag example is 250
it.
pounds. It's
Yeah, well, you get to
it
a
says a
point,
lot.
right, where it's, yeah.
Um, yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So when it comes to the stones, where do you get your stones, and what do you look for? I like the term reading
Mhm.
stones. That's one of those terms you can tell you're a master of your craft when you that it's like the little details like that. But yeah, what do you do you have certain spots you like to go? Do you like to look at streams? I know streams have a lot of exposed stones. That's I've always got mine. But yeah, where do you go? And then how heavy are the stones that you have your go-to
Yeah.
stash?
So when I first started stone lifting here a number of years ago, a friend of mine, a guy that's now a very good friend of mine, he was the first guy that I knew that kind of started collecting a stone or two he got from a public park, which he shouldn't do, but it's a funny story. He brought a sled, took a stone, and back to his garage, and that was kind of how stone lifting was born in Edmonton, where I'm from. But after getting involved with his competitions, I was very fortunate to win the first stone lifting competition I went in. And from there, I really wanted to see it develop here. And so originally we were getting it just from landscaping stores, which I think for anybody listening, like if you don't know where to get stones, try and go to a landscaping store. Depending where you're from, you could just have, there could be really cruddy stones that are sharp, but there could also be what's called, a field stone, which is generally speaking what people like to lift. And so shortly after getting involved in stone lifting, I started something called the Edmonton Stones of Strength. And we've been very, very fortunate with how that is it's been a grassroots project, and just that I started with some buddies so we could lift stones together, right? But it's grown and grown and grown, which is super cool. But where I'm getting at with that is we were very fortunate where we are. The last ice age hit really hard. Like I'm in, Alberta, Canada. The ice age was a serious thing here, right? And so there was a glacial lake here in Edmonton. And the reason I know this stuff is because my brother is a geologist, and so which has been helpful in all this. But when Glacial Lake Edmonton broke, there's a huge deposit of large stones here. And so 2 minutes down the road from my house is a public park. And in the forest, there was dozens and dozens and dozens of stones that I was able to find, dig up, weight, and that's where Edmonton Stones of Strength came from. Now, all in this area, there's a whole bunch of, there's stones in the forest, there's stones down at the North Saskatchewan River, which is right by where we are. And so although at the start I purchased a number of stones, every one of the ones that I have now, except for one of them, which I've only kept because it's been used in competitions here, so it has some sentimental meaning, are ones that I've dug up and found. Now, for sizes, like I'm in my garage gym right now, and behind me I have, let's see, a 309 pounds, 325, 365, 309, which is completely different shaped than the other 309, and then a 403, plus a number of Atlas stones and a whole bunch of other lots of random things. But generally, they're pretty high in weight because just, as anybody progresses in the sport that they love, there's not a lot of, you're not going to get much. Like I'm not going to get a ton of value from lifting a 200-pound stone at this point, right? And that, I'm not saying that to be egotistical whatsoever, but I've put the groundwork in where that is not enough of a stimulus unless I'm going to be doing sets of 12, which kind of starts getting away from the point of stone lifting, which tends to be more towards one rep maxes. And when you're carrying, it's kind of interesting because your ability to lap a stone and your max carry are going to get to a point where they're quite similar. So heavier is where you start to get the real results once you've built, and it is important, the fundamentals, right? And so, yeah, and I got Atlas stones here too. So I warm up with Atlas stones and then jump into the heavier stones.
That's really cool. Right now you said you're training for a competition in Iceland. What was the name of that again?
So, not a competition actually. It's
Not a competition, actually.
So this is where we kind of branch into the historical stone. So there's a massive history of
let's get into
historical
that.
stone lifting in Iceland, as there is all over the world. And that's what actually originally drew me into stone lifting. The type of training that I do with the modern stone lifting is a result of my fascination in the historical stone lifting. But without getting too long-winded with this, my brother and I are going to do all around Iceland. There are historical feats of strength, historical stones that people have been doing for hundreds of years. The Vikings, we know, were doing stone lifting in the ages of the sagas, which goes back, 1,000 years. We knew the Vikings were stone lifting. And the result of that is that only a few hundred years ago that had carried on, and those actual stones used in those actual historical feats of strength are still sitting in that exact location, and we're going to go test ourselves on them. The main one being the Husafell carry, which is, the Husafell stone is probably the widest known stone in the world. There are replicas used in strongman competitions everywhere, and it's 410 pounds, and the goal is to pick that up to your lap and then walk it around an old goat's pen, which is 98 feet across. So you're carrying 409, 410 pounds, just shy of 100 feet.
Yeah. Wow. And just to clarify, when you say carry, you're talking about like a low carry, like
on
down,
your chest. You're gonna pick it up. It's
on your chest.
I don't want to say it's shaped like a shield, but that's probably the easiest way for people to picture it. And yeah, you pick it up into your lap, stand up with it, hold it on your chest, and then carry it. And so one of the things that a lot of people may not consider when you hear something like this is the difficulty that it is to actually breathe. Like there's so many elements because you have that weight of that stone is on your chest. So you don't just have to pick it and move with it and be able to support that with your legs and hips, but you have to actually be able to train your diaphragm and your ribs and your intercostals to be able to breathe under that kind of load, which has become its own separate challenge that I've been addressing.
Separate challenge. Do you do breathwork exercises or weighted breathing
Yeah.
exercises or anything like that, like to target the breathing
Yeah, I've been
specifically?
experimenting that the last few months. I'm kind of like a cycle with certain training. I will just load weight up onto my chest, lay on the floor and breathe. So I've got to the point where I can do 45-second sets with 309 pounds a stone just laying on my chest. And as strange as that sounds, if you actually consider the function of what it is I'm doing, developing my diaphragm and my intercostal muscles to be able to expand under that much load is going to directly carry over to my goal.
Like, interesting. It, how has that? How have you noticed the carryover of that, like the diaphragm strength and other things? So your whether it's firefighting training or on the job
I
duties,
mean,
um, or your other stuff like shouldering the stone. Is that a big lever in these
we'll
other
see.
movements?
We'll see because the snow is still on the ground here.
Yep.
The litmus test will be when I'm able to train outside again. So I'm hoping that I go to do a big carry that was difficult last year and I go, okay, that feels a little bit easier, right? So time will tell with that. I would have to hope that it helps. I don't see how it couldn't. The fundamentals are there, the basics are there, the concept is there. And so it's just whether or not sometimes you can have a great idea in training and then it doesn't play out the way you hoped. You can see why you got to that thought process, but doesn't necessarily work. And so that's kind of a lot of the fun in all this for me too, is because stone lifting is still kind of the wild west in training. We know what works in Olympic lifting. We know what works in powerlifting. Strongman is becoming huge. And so we're getting the process. We're getting really good at a lot of those things. But stone lifting can be trained extremely different by many people, and it's really cool to see what some people come up with and what works for them, right? So it's quite fun to, I like tinkering with training, and that's part of the reason that, like I said, I have a difficult time sticking to my own programs, because half of the fun and the enjoyment of training for me is finding new ways to play with the weight and to get better at it, right? Because so much of, like, you got to think about this. There's a technique to using a fork or a spoon, right? Like, if you think about it. And so the technique required to get good at any given task, there's a lot of ways to get to it. And so it's just fun to see what ways you can do that makes it
Yep.
fun.
What are some of the schools of thought, whether it's uh, people from historical stone lifting specifically, or from other things? Maybe it's Wim Hof's breathing or something like that that you've taken and applied. So, what are some of like the schools of thought, the godfathers of thinking that you've tied on to? You keep bringing up like fundamentals and this stuff. I can tell you like to go deep, to the roots of what you're learning. So what are those roots for
Well,
you?
when I speak about fundamentals, I'm more speaking about the basic positions and movements you need to be in when you lift a stone. That's more what I speak about fundamentals. I've learned from some very skilled stone lifters online, which has been great. I've had a guy named Ryan Stewart who is widely renowned as one of the better stone lifters that's maybe ever lived. He's done a lot. And when I was training for my first historical stone lifting tour in 2022 for Scotland, he trained me. And so I was fortunate to learn from him. And so I've taken some of the principles from that, some of the principles from my past training. Like, I used to compete in powerlifting and strongman. When COVID hit, I started getting to steel bending and snapping horseshoes with my hands and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And so the things that I've learned haven't just been from this guy's train of thought and then this guy. It's been like a smattering of all sorts of training over well over a decade of experience of in strength sport.
So what about then just for stone lifting in particular? You've got Ryan Stewart. Is that where you'd go for like the fundamentals? Since um yeah, that's really what I'm curious about. If I wanted to study the fundamentals of posture and alignment and the application of stone lifting, what's the best way to get that down?
It's so that's kind of, there is no real book on that. Like, if you want to get good at powerlifting, you can go to the 531, which is a very basic, or you can read some of Louis Simmons books, right, on the conjugate. And that is there. If you want, I suppose, if you want to learn, if you know nothing about stone lifting, there is a book called Stone Lifting by Martin Jancic and Dr. Bill Crawford. That's a great place to start. they lay out a lot of the fundamentals, but I would say that's the closest thing that we have in this world because it can be trained so differently. So I know guys that do nothing but lift stones and it works really well for them and they're extremely high level. I know other guys that don't touch a stone until they're going on a stone lifting tour and they're big and strong enough that that works for them. And so you have this wide array of capabilities for stones, but so there is no like I wish I could give you more to go off of. There is no actual rule book for any of the training, which is part of why it's so cool. Like this is one of the things that I find super interesting about stone lifting. So I have a good friend, and he competed in the worlds for strongman. He's extremely diligent, extremely strong, and he weighs the same as my brother. And my brother was, your average gym lifter, and I'm not saying that any criticizing. He never done any strength sports or anything. And you've got these two guys that weigh the same. And my friend who competed at Worlds for strongman is much worse at stone lifting than my brother. My brother's like out of the gates, very first time lifting a stone was in my front yard, and he did stuff that my friend who competed at Worlds can't do. So there is no actual like rule book for this. It doesn't make sense a lot of this stuff. And like um for instance, if you look at strongman competitions, right? So the in the I believe it's 2018 Arnold's, they had the elephant bar deadlift and they had Atlas stone and they had natural stone to shoulder. Okay. So Brian Shaw, I think he had deadlifted, I always forget the number, over 1,000, I think it was 1,031 pounds on the elephant bar, right? Which is just a bigger deadlift bar that has a little more slack. Brian Shaw also stood with a 563-pound Atlas stone, but Brian Shaw couldn't shoulder a 409-pound natural stone. That's less than his body weight. So the math doesn't quite compute with that. And like I've shouldered 403 pounds at just like I'm 210 pounds, right? So the math doesn't actually add up with a lot of the things in stone lifting, which is why I think it's just so fascinating. You can have a guy who's done nothing but a farmer his whole life and step up and lift massive stones out of the gate, or you can have a very trained barbell athlete who can't do anything with stones. So it's really quite fascinating. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling on this topic, but it's just like there is no rule book for it. So that's why it's important for people to get out and just start lifting stones to get experience on them.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And like I said, I'm into martial arts, and that's one of the other just sort of
Mm-hmm.
ancient sports. It feels like a very human thing to participate in. And if you look at the history, it goes back as far as you can tell. What is the history of stone training exactly? Is it have there been this Icelandic stone? Are there a lot of these historical markers that have been carried through time? And as how far back does it go where people you can tell people have been competitively or organized in their stone lifting training?
It goes back well over 2,000 years of documented history, which is super cool. There's the Bybon stone is one of the more famous ones out there. It's kind of turned into an internet meme where it literally was inscribed on a Bybon, son of Foa, lifted me over his head. There's some debate on the actual translation, but that's the loose translation, and that I believe is dated to 2,100 or 2,300 years ago. There's references that go back into the Old Testament. There is an actual temple in Tibet, and painted on the side of this Tibetan monastery 1,300 years ago. So this paint is 1,300 years old. Depicts scenes of stone lifting, and so you got to understand that stone lifting didn't just start the year before that and they painted it. You have to, for something to be significant enough to be painted on the side of a monastery, you got to you got to know that it goes back a lot further than that for it to be significant enough for that. And so when we talk about documented history, we're into the thousands of years, right? It's human beings have been the same for a long time, and strength is kind of the original survival commodity, right? It is status. It is all of the things right now in our modern times. Strength is the least important that it's ever been, ever. We have these notions in our mind that because we see these gigantic bodybuilders or these gigantic strongmen that somehow strength is a modern invention, it is so foolish. I can't even get into strength. People were way stronger than average back in time, right? And so as long as there have been people, there's been a need for fighting. for hunting. And how did you prove yourself? You had to be strong, right? That was the original currency. And what ways did they have to test that on? They had it maybe wrestling, fighting, which could mess people up, or they would have to lift a tree, or they would lift a stone. So the concept of stone lifting, we have to imagine it's not like 2,000 years ago somebody just went, oh, that's heavy, I bet you I could pick it up, and stone lifting was born. This goes way back. It has to. There's no way that it can't. But with respect to the actual historical stones, there are tests all over the world. Most of them go back just into the hundreds of years. The thousands of years ones are all lost to time. But there's like this stuff goes back in India, Pakistan, in parts of Polynesia, like just literally all over the world. There's guys that have been doing research in ancient texts. They have found out about these stones. They've traveled to these countries and they found the location and they've rediscovered these stones. Ryan Stewart being one of them, the guy that I talked about that took me on as an athlete. And so it's just really fascinating stuff, man. Like there's one in Scotland. This is one of the ones that really turned me on to the concept, called the Fianna Stone. The Fianna Stone, well, the Fianna were a band of Irish warriors that came over, some of them to Scotland, and they were kind of like the special forces of the Highland clans. And they're testing stone that, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 years ago, this stone was started to be lifted in order to become a Fianna. And you can travel to that location in Scotland, in this ancient area, and lift that exact stone. And that's what we did, and my brother and I. And I just think that is so cool. And to know that these tests are all over the world is really what drew me into the concept of stone lifting in general.
Do you have a list of stones that you want to lift around the world that you're trying to check off?
The Scottish ones, yeah, I checked the box off on that. It was amazing. There's Iceland, which we're going to in 2 months here. Ireland would also be a really, really big one. But like, I have two children. My brother has two children, and so family life is obviously number one. That is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to get away, which is also partially why we started the Edmonton Stones of Strength. So at least we can have that strength culture and those challenges here when we can't get away. So yeah, there's many places I'd like to go to, but it's not an option. Nor I don't want to leave my family for all that.
So that ties into Edmonton Stones of Strength. I wanted to ask about that, and this kind of is along the lines of your vision and your mission and what you want to do with stone lifting beyond your own training. So yeah, what is Edmonton Stones of Strength, and what's your mission with it? What are you hoping to accomplish? What's the improvement you're helping make?
Yeah, so the original concept was just to bring world-class feats of strength to Edmonton, right? To give people a taste of what stone lifting is like and can be like. And that was the original concept. And it's kind of, I don't want to say morphed, but it's kind of shifted a bit to be something that's not just about world-class feats of strength. It's about opportunities for everybody of all ages and like all strength levels to be able to try stone lifting. So at our site, we host events once a year, and it's just like, this is the small, it's in a small little park. There's a little fire pit, and we get a whole bunch of people to come down, again, all different strength levels. We pick 4 to 5 events, and it's not a competition. There's no winner, there's no loser. It's literally just about everybody pushing themselves and being supported by everybody else. It's a really great time. People seem to really like it. And we have stones from, 130 pounds. Like, we have stones for children, of course, too, but from 130 pounds up to 430 pounds. We have a variety of stones, all in that. Yeah, and basically in that entire gap there. So it gives people of all different levels a chance to try this and to try the different styles of lifting too, right? You might be able to lap a massive stone, but only shoulder a light stone. And there's the opportunity for progression. There's the opportunity for goals, for challenges. And yeah, it's become a really cool thing. We see more and more people coming down there. I just find it's really neat. Like, my brother and I, because it's in a public park, there could be anybody in there just having a picnic, right? And so there was a time where my brother and I, this is just last year, we went down to go lift some stones. There was somebody there, so we went right next to, we have a site with a few other stones, and a fellow walked over and started talking to us, and he'd heard about us online and came down and started just lifting the stones on his own. And then sure enough, we just happened to be there. And that was really cool for me, because that was the whole point of this, right? Is this guy was passing through Edmonton. I think he was from British Columbia, which is the province west of us. And he's like, oh, if we're in Edmonton, I got to go check out these stones. And like, how cool is that, right?
Yeah, and so when you started the social media, you started making posts. With what was the vision with that? Was it since that's kind of like a full circle moment? You know, you've got the online world combining with the real world, and you see it in action. You know, um, it, yeah. What was it? Was it you wanting to get it out there in the world? Was it you seeing that, hey, there's this thing I'm doing, I'm feeling great. It's I can feel the benefits from this. I want more people to see it, more people to understand that it's available, accessible.
It's yeah,
Sure.
I suppose that's one way for sure. There's definitely a part of that. A lot of it is to kind of the element of community, right? Like that's one of the social media has a lot of nonsense on it. And we all know that, but there's also a lot of positivity too. I've met some incredible people online, which is awesome, right? The stone lifting world is quite a small world, and being able to connect with people all over the world who have similar interests is great, right? That's awesome for all people. Anybody who's into something that's not exactly mainstream, they like to connect with people. And so the Edmonton Stones of Strength was obviously a chance to get into stone lifting here and bring it out to more people, but it was also kind of getting into the stone lifting game and having people recognize that we're doing it here too, and to show other people everywhere that you don't have to travel overseas to lift stones. Not a lot of people have that opportunity at all, right? Like I'm fortunate to get away every few years to do this. Some people might never have that opportunity. And so I got this idea from Ryan Stewart, who started something called the Utah Stones of Strength, which is available on YouTube. They've done a documentary about it, which is super cool. And he set up stones all around the state of Utah. And so again, Alberta's big, man. Like I don't think a lot of times people realize like just how big and spread out everything is in Canada. And so I just wanted to have it more condensed here in Edmonton. And so again, it was just given the opportunity for people locally to try this stuff.
And then what's been the response so far? Is in locally in Edmonton? You've kind of mentioned a little bit, but um, do you feel the community growing around you? And then also online, has what kind of interactions has this led to? What passes has led you down? Maybe some of the ones that you didn't
Yeah, man.
expect.
Like I do like I can't emphasize this enough. Where I'm at now with how things have gotten was never ever the goal at all. We Edmonton Stones of Strength got recognized very quickly somehow. We were mentioned in a GQ article, and then we had an entire, basically like a huge uh, article in the Globe and Mail, which is one of Canada's biggest papers about us. We've had people come in my garage gym for a national level documentary to talk to us about stone lifting. We've got guys like Tom Haviland, who's maybe one of the strongest humans to ever live. If people don't know who Tom Haviland is, check him out. He's unbelievable. He's in Australia. He's ordered our shirts because he just thinks what we're doing is cool. And so, like this stuff it's just grown. I think a lot of people recognize grassroots efforts, and it's blown my mind, man. Because none of this, like I can't say it honestly enough, none of this was my intention. I just wanted us to have the opportunity to lift with my friends and bring some people in, and also be like, hey guys in Scotland, we do this over here too. And it's kind of it's got a lot of attention, man. It's been pretty wild. And like here 2 months ago, I got invited down to California to be on the Mark Bell's podcast, which is one of the biggest strength podcasts in the world. And that's bizarre to me, man. Like that's, dude, like I work out of my garage gym or in a forest. Like I'm not looking for any of that kind of stuff. It's just kind of happened. So it's been a wild ride, man. And it's just good to see more people getting involved in something that I think is really meaningful.
Why do you think it's getting so much recognition? Like it, what do you think about the stone lifting is drawing people in, and do you kind of feel that the main priorities of culture and lifting is kind of shifting towards these more functional patterns that you'd find in stone
Yes,
lifting?
that's well, yeah, your last part there, definitely. I think a lot of people's focus is maybe shifting. They realize that you don't got to be a gym bro to be fit and to be strong. And I think that's great. Like, there's nothing wrong with bodybuilding. That's fantastic. Like, dude, I was born in '85. I grew up in like the Arnie era, right? Like where he was big in the movies and Stallone and all that stuff. That was like my first exposure to any strength, right? And that's great for a lot of people. But a lot of people, that's not their thing. And so I think a lot of people can connect with this kind of stuff more. They see something different, go, yeah, like let's give that a try. That seems inherently functional and to make sense. Like the concept of functional training that's maybe one of the most overused thing I've ever heard, like in my entire life. Like you see somebody do a kettlebell snatch overhead and go, this is functional training. It's like, sure, sure it is. Anything's functional if you have an application outside of its efforts. But like, I just really think that this is truly like fundamental strength more than it even is functional strength, right? Like I just think a lot of people connect with that. I think a lot of people connect with the idea of the heritage of it. You know, like behind me right there over my head, that is my Scottish family kilt. Like that, being a Scottish descendant, seeing about Scottish stone lifting, like just was amazing, man. Like that tartan and my clan goes back like 5, 6, 700 years, right? And so there's a heritage that you associate with it, right? So a lot of people know about the Highland Games, and stone lifting for the Scots is kind of an offshoot of that. And so there's a heritage to it. There's a general interest. It's the fact that you're outside. When we have our get together for lifting, I'll be there with my boys. My brother will bring his boys sometime. We'll have a fire. Our kids are, 4 and 7, and they'll be in the bushes, hitting trees with sticks like kids are supposed to, jumping off the rocks, scraping their knees while a bunch of the guys are lifting stones and, making a fire. And that's like, it's wholesome. It's great training. It's community. It's family. And I think a lot of people in the modern world are missing just the basics like that, man. I think we're missing out on a lot of the things that just make people happy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask. You've got an interesting dichotomy going on because you're kind of promoting these timeless exercises, right? We talk about stone lifting going back basically as far as recorded history goes back. But at the same time, you're promoting that and sharing that via
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of involved like intimately with the modern world, the modern trends, but also the ancient world and kind of the timeless trends. Um, so do you kind of see yourself as like a spokesman for the old ways in like the new language? Is that something you've ever thought
I
about?
haven't thought about it like that, man. Like I've come to terms with the fact that I'm a bit of a spokesperson for stone lifting, which is cool because I love it. And I hope I'm a good example of it. Like my brother and I run a podcast. It's called the Stone to Strength Podcast, where we talk to people all over the world about it. And so, obviously to an extent, I'm a spokesperson for it, but I don't really think about it as the old ways meeting the new, even though that's exactly kind of what we're doing. It's just not a way I've perceived it or perceptualized it. It's just I really just like my page that I just literally post things that I enjoy doing, man. Like that's really truly it. I will train more irregular than a lot of people that are still lifting, and I've been told that, and it's true. Like I'll throw a band on an Atlas stone and do banded Atlas stone. So I'm kind of like doing a hybrid of the concept of modern conjugate training with old stone lifting, and it's just, dude, like I'm literally trying to get strong, stay fit, and have fun, and then at the same time be involved in something cool like stone lifting, man. Like it's none of this is really like I never set a sight on something other than, like I want to go lift the Dinny stones in Scotland and I want to go to do the Husfell stone in Iceland. Like those are big goals, but it's never been like I've never had a plan for any of this stuff. I'm just like literally doing my thing, man. That's it. I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. It's you keep bringing up the fundamentals and even kind of brought up the term fundamental strength is what you're building rather than functional strength. But earlier on, I was talking about the idea of transference, and I think it's safe to say that the more fundamental the strength you're building, the higher the transference.
Yes, and
Um,
it's not just the
yeah,
strength in general. It's the concepts. I think that has been. So I maybe am overusing the word fundamentals, but what I'm trying to get the point across is for if anybody's done sports or athletics of any kind, you are going to build upon what you have learned and developed, right? So when I was very young, I did gymnastics just as a kid, and we got my kids into it. And the body awareness, for instance, you get from gymnastics is going to be applicable to hockey and then to wrestling. And wrestling, you're going to build some strength and technique. And from that, you're going to be able to apply it to this. And the body, like things feed off of each other, right? So when you build fundamental, I'll use the word again, body awareness, conditioning, strength, all of these things are able to build off. So I started powerlifting. I spent my life doing athletics. I was very, very privileged in the fact that my parents are athletes, and they spent all their time and money giving me and my brothers the opportunity to do sports. And so that's super cool. And the point is, when I got to strength training, I had some fundamentals again of athleticism. And then off of that, I built onto powerlifting, and things just basically fed off each other. So that's more so what I'm speaking when I'm saying that word is it's not looking at the one specific thing and starting from the ground up. It's the accruement of experience, information, knowledge, training, and awareness that you can then apply to what you're doing in that given time. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. That's perfect sense. All right, I wanted to ask too for people wanting to start on stone lifting. I noticed that you've got a pad, which might be necessary in some spaces. What's your recommendation on the pad? And then, what's a good what's a good weight or a good target maybe as a percentage of body weight or however you think of it for people starting out, if they're going looking for stones.
Okay, so that's going to depend a lot again on the individual. So one of the things that I find really quite cool about stone lifting is it has basically a built-in safety mechanism in it. So it's not necessarily a baseline weight I think people should worry about. So when you go to do a max effort deadlift, you can use straps and you are glued to that bar, and you could hypothetically blow your back out because you are loading your body with a weight you cannot lift. Stone lifting is not that way. Our backs are very strong, right? And our hips are strong, and people's wrists are what give out on stone lifting. And so basically, if you can break that stone off of the ground, that's probably a good place to start, because that means that your body is going to be able to be capable of lifting that soon enough, right? Like, you're not going to have, with stone lifting, you could have a back rated for 500 pounds, let's say, right? But if your wrist can only hold 100 in a bent position like this on each side, then you're not going to lift the stone. So I'm doing a bit of a tangent, but the point is that for each individual person, that weight is going to be different. And so it's just go and just try and find a stone that looks nice and one that looks like it would be fun to lift, and give it a go, right? Whether that is at your local river, if you know a farmer that has, a lot of times farmers will have a whole stack of stones because they cleared all the field stones so they can plant crops. So a lot of times farmers will have piles of stone, or wherever it is that you can get your hands on it. Go and play around, see if you can start that basics. Now, if you have access to sandbags and you know you can stand with a 250-pound sandbag, well, then maybe that's a good gauge for where you want to start with stone lifting. Just my best piece of advice is check your ego and don't even bring your deadlift into the equation at all. Like, so many people think, oh, okay, like I posted videos of me, whatever, shouldering 325. And people like, oh, that's my warm up deadlift. It's like, that's cool, man. We're not talking about the same thing. So don't, and I've seen this actually in action. We had a guy who's been an Olympic lifter for 10 years, really nice man, really strong guy, had some great numbers Olympic lifting. He came down to our stone site and goes, how much is that? Okay, that's that. I'm going to lift this to shoulder. I'm going to put this overhead and all these things. And he got destroyed and never came back again because he brought his gym ego into stones. It's just a different thing. And so that's why it's very difficult for me to give generalized recommendations for where to start. I really think that people just go out and have a play with some stones they have access to and see where it goes from there.
For sure. And then those pads,
Oh, sorry.
what are those pads that you use? Where do you
Oh
get
yeah, so the
them?
ones, it's just a crash pad. It's a strongman implement, and
Okay.
I, if you
Gotcha.
like your
Okay.
garage floor, then maybe it's a good idea. Like, that's just
Yeah.
yeah, that's for safety, not necessarily of you. It's just of your property. If you're outside, like if you ever go to lift a
Yes.
historical stone, people please set it down with respect, like, because they can break and that happens. If it's your stone in your backyard, you're going to dent your gravel or your grass, but other than that, it's not a big deal. So those pads are more to just protect your property. You can get them cheap enough online. They're well worth
Yep.
it.
Yeah. For sure. Um, Awesome. And then where can people find you? You've got your podcast, your social media. Anyone who's watching, where's the best place to find you, get a hold of you if they
Yeah.
have
If anybody
questions?
listening to this is actually interested or wants me to look over some technique, I'm always open. I answer every message I get just to try and help people. So caveman.daveman, I think, on Instagram. The Stones of Strength podcast is my brother and I's podcast. is interesting at all to you, we have great guests from like some of the most respected stone lifters from across the world, stone researchers, really cool guys that come on and we talk a lot about everything stone lifting basically. And so that's again the Stone and Strength podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Spotify, or anywhere you can find podcasts basically. And I have a small YouTube channel, just caveman.daveman, but there's not much on there. But again, yeah, I'm starting to put some stuff on there. If people are interested to keep an eye on what I'm throwing on there, that's cool, man.
Awesome. And I'll include all those links in the description everywhere this podcast is posted. But Dave, this is really cool. I'm glad we got to
Sure, man.
connect. I had multiple people send me your stuff, so it's sweet what you're doing. I think that the world will be a better place if more people get into stone lifting. It'll be a stronger
Yeah,
community.
that's for
So
sure, man.
thanks, man. This is
Yeah,
really
thank
cool.
you for having me on, man. I appreciate the invite.